The majority of crypto investors out there, or the majority of people in the world, are blind to the fact that Bitcoin is about to touch its all time high, and it can get very, very bullish if it starts to cross above its all time high. Now, this might be contrary to a lot of people's belief. People think something's going towards its all time high, man, I should buy when it's down. I'm going to wait for it to come back a little bit. Well, that is not the case, and I want to show you why. How if Bitcoin can break above that $108,000 level, can continue this momentum, then it could really quickly shoot up to 110, 111, $112,000, maybe all the way to 120,000. So this is what I'm watching on Bitcoin. We've had a very, very good week this week for Bitcoin, Cardano, crypto as a whole, and I think this deserves some coverage. People need to understand what's going on here and how this can affect them. Okay, this is the week I'm talking about. This is a weekly chart here on Bitcoin, and you can see this week right here we are up 10% almost, and you can just see this very beautiful retracement or gain back to this upper neckline, right? This is the all-time high right here of $109,356 for Bitcoin, and you can see here in this week alone we have wicked all the way up to $104,332 for Bitcoin. Today the price is about $103,000 as of the time of recording this video. But we're seeing some very bullish momentum here. Bitcoin's back above the 30-week and the 40-week moving average. This is indicative of a very long-term uptrend, like a stage 2 uptrend. And we can see how as long as Bitcoin is respecting the 30 and 40-week moving average, it will be in an uptrend. We can see this in prior cycles as well in 2021, and we can even see this back here in 2017. Okay, so the big fear or the big reason to get out of Bitcoin is when it crosses below the 30 and 40-week retest and fails. You can see this in 2021 as well. We did come below, but then we got back above. That was that second high for 69,000. But when it came back below, touched the 30-week again and failed, that is game over. Bitcoin has not been doing that this cycle. It has been continuously getting back above the 30-week, and that's why these past 3 weeks on Bitcoin have been so bullish, because we've been able to get back above the 30-week and are now moving to all-time highs. The big scenario I want people to look out for is this. What could happen here on Bitcoin is it could be building a cup and handle, basically, or a volatility contraction pattern where Bitcoin comes up like this and we get this first cup, right? But over here, we could take a few weeks and Bitcoin could build a second little handle right in this range where we have a few weeks that are right here, just kind of getting tighter along as this moving average comes up. And this could really squeeze price in against this right side shoulder here, which will then lead to Bitcoin having a very volatile move to the upside very rapidly. Maybe we could get all the way up to $110,000 or $111,000 or $112,000 in like one single week. And so this pattern right here is very, very good and very bullish because Bitcoin is coming back and testing this all-time high range. And if it were to break out from that all-time high range, it would do it probably on a very high amount of volume, and it would get a lot of investors jumping in very rapidly. And so a lot of people think as we move to all-time highs, this shouldn't be the time that we invest. We should be investing, on a pullback or something like that. Well, the big time you want to invest is when things are making new all-time highs, especially as things like the S&P 500 have been coming down, right? Bitcoin has held up relatively well compared to the S&P 500, and I know that the percentages are a little bit different. Bitcoin is just showing as a very leading asset as it's recovering so quickly. And so that means that if Bitcoin breaks above this all-time high, gets to around $110,000 very rapidly, then the factor of price appreciation has the ability to be very quick and very momentous at a very rapid pace. If we move this over to the daily chart, you can kind of see what I'm talking about here again a little further, is we have this neckline here, right? This is, let's change these moving averages over. We're going to put on here the 50, the 150, and the 200 day. Now, what's so important about these last couple of weeks is that Bitcoin has been able to get back above this dark orange one, which is the 200 day. You can see over this long-term period, when Bitcoin is in an uptrend, it's respecting that 200 day moving average. And so what we want to see here is Bitcoin to stay above the 200 day. And so what I personally think is going to happen here is we have this nice little cup. What I think we need is a handle, right? We need a handle, or we need price to kind of come in here, and then here, and then here, and then here, and make its way on the upside. Now, that kind of coincides with these moving averages as well. We're going to have that 150 come across. We're going to have this 200 kind of come right in here and touch this 150, kind of like this. But then this 50-day is going to come up in here and start to cut through all the noise, right? That is where we could see Bitcoin's price come back and touch that 50-day before heading back up here to this $105,000 level. And then if it kind of chops along here or has an explosive price move upwards, that is going to be your catalyst to get you back up to $110,000 to $112,000 at a very rapid pace. How do we invalidate this? We invalidate this by saying that Bitcoin, if it does not have the ability to get above this kind of area between $104,000, $105,000, $106,000, and we kind of just come in here and make like this lower low, or I'm sorry, this higher low, right? And Bitcoin comes up here and it makes this high that it's currently at right now, but it doesn't come back and touch up here at $109,000, $108,000. This could in fact be a very bearish scenario. Now, we could see that as what would happen here is Bitcoin will come up here to around where it's at right now, and over the next couple weeks, it will just make its way lower back into these moving averages and then just kind of break below them, which would be very bearish. We could kind of see that as this 50-day would cut up, but eventually what you'd see is this 150-day cut below this 200-day, and it would kind of all just roll over simultaneously. This would take a couple weeks, maybe a couple months or two for all this action to happen. But if Bitcoin, on the contrary, cannot get above this $104,000, $105,000 level here and cannot go make a new all-time high, I would say that there's pretty good evidence that the Bitcoin cycle would be heading lower for a little bit. By lower, we could say, maybe something here in the lines of like 60,000, right? So you'd see something like this. A lot of people talked about this. And so if this trend line kind of held true and Bitcoin came back down, you kind of expect something in this range, right? About lower 60,000, upper $50,000 for where Bitcoin can come and touch before probably coming back up to the moving averages, which are curling over right here at this time, and then touching those and then heading lower for, maybe in 2026 or something like that. And so there's kind of two scenarios I'm looking at. It's either Bitcoin is getting very bullish and is making a new all-time high. That's honestly the one that I think that's happening. We see a lot of momentum and a lot of reasons for Bitcoin to keep going up following the M2 cycle. Maybe we're going to get some resolution on lowering lowering interest rates in the summer, maybe stopping quantitative tightening in the summer. And so all these catalysts are sort of feeding into that. What I generally think is happening is Bitcoin's going to build a VCP pattern, which is a 1, 2, basically it's like a cup and handle, where volatility of price contracts in this area against this neckline, and then it will have volume's going to keep falling down, and then it will dry up somewhere around here, and then Bitcoin is going to just crank higher than this trend line at a very rapid pace. That's honestly what I think is happening because I'm still bullish on crypto, given the cycle, given the charts, given the moving averages, and given how Bitcoin's playing with price. But the bearish scenario is if Bitcoin cannot do that, this would be a lower high compared to this, and that would mean that we are theoretically probably going lower for much longer. You can also kind of see that as a decrease in volume, right? Every time Bitcoin comes in here to put in a high like this one right here, you can see how big volume gets down here, right? And so in between, as Bitcoin kind of fades down, volume kind of fades down with it, and sell volume actually increases a lot, right? You can kind of see this here. We have these big volume spikes, and then as it's kind of distributing, volume kind of falls down. What we're seeing here is we're definitely seeing that same scenario. So Bitcoin had a huge rally, right, up into this new all-time high that it has, and since then we have had a decrease in volume. Right here we had a lot of sell volume, right? This coincides with this drop. And so what we want to see here is Bitcoin start to continue to shrink that volume as it comes over here to the side, and then eventually have a new volume price spike, which will get Bitcoin back up to like $112,000, $115,000, and give it into this whole new cycle of growth and distribution. Realistically, though, when I look at this Bitcoin chart, I still remain very bullish. Although, at this point, I made my purchases on Bitcoin somewhere maybe like right around here. I don't 100% remember, but a lot of people are in a very good profit. What I would say here is now might not be the best time to buy Bitcoin, just because we don't know the direction it's going. We don't know if Bitcoin's going to come back, and honestly, it could come back down, and it could touch about $90,000, somewhere in this range, while still being bullish, right? That's part of this cup and handle pattern. Is you get a cup, you get a handle, maybe it can drop 10 to 15% in this window, and it's still bullish. As long as Bitcoin remains above this 30-week moving average, it is still bullish. And so I wouldn't go ahead and necessarily just ape all into Bitcoin as it's had this massive week right here. If next week is a continuation of this massive week with amazingly high volume, then maybe, you kind of ride that momentum into the next stage upwards to like 120,000 or something like that. But right here, what I honestly think would probably happen is, there might be a little sell off. And if there is a sell off, I wouldn't worry. We could see Bitcoin drop down here about $94,000, and everything's still going to be okay. Maybe right there would be a good spot to just see what happens, right? Right now, we need to kind of see how Bitcoin digests this move. If it comes back up and then it starts to break out, this might be a great time to buy Bitcoin. Obviously, we're going to have to see how it plays out, but Bitcoin is doing something very special, in my opinion. I think it is getting very bullish, and not a lot of people are really paying attention. And definitely, the retail people who are not watching crypto videos, not paying attention to crypto, do not really understand that this is happening. And so, this to me, very bullish Bitcoin chart. And I think that Bitcoin dominance is also getting very bullish as we see Bitcoin dominance fall dramatically in this week, even as Bitcoin's rising. This means that a lot of other coins are rapidly appreciating in price. Something like Ethereum has done very well this week, up 30%. And so that is where we're seeing all this drop in Bitcoin dominance. And so this could be a sign that Bitcoin dominance has topped out for the cycle. I personally think that this is a pretty good spot for Bitcoin dominance to top out, and I would bet pretty much that is the top on Bitcoin. Now, I could be wrong. What we want to see here with the Bitcoin dominance chart is the inverse what we want to see on the Bitcoin chart. So over here, you can see in like 2020 to 2021, Bitcoin dominance moved into altcoin season when Bitcoin dominance crossed below the 30-week moving average right here and dropped further. And so what we want to see here is Bitcoin dominance is going to come down, I think, flirt with the 30 and 40-week moving average. We want it to break below, then it'll probably come up and retest, and then it will break down. This giant move is when we will get our altcoin season. So if you're bullish on altcoins, whether it's Ethereum, Solana, Cardano, ICP, whatever, you need Bitcoin dominance to fall. Bitcoin dominance, will fall based on something like quantitative tightening, interest rates, stuff like that. And so if these charts kind of tell us the message of what is happening out in the market. And there's probably going to be some type of news in May, June, July that is indicative to these events happening. And so that's kind of the whole, they assign the narrative to the price action. I just read the price action. It doesn't really matter what's going on out there. But I like that we're seeing Bitcoin go up on its moving averages, holding really well. I like that we're seeing Bitcoin dominance falling. How much has it fallen this week? About 2% this week so far, which is good. And then, we're having altcoins rip off of that. So this is my Bitcoin analysis. We're seeing Bitcoin do some really good stuff. And I think if Bitcoin gets above kind of that $105,000 level, starts to break towards its all-time high at $109,000, and then breaks that $109,000 level, Bitcoin is going to have a very, very, very rapid price appreciation that a lot of people are not really prepared for. It could jump to like $120,000, $125,000 within a week, and we could see some massive new gains on Bitcoin, which would then have the ability to probably people peeling some profits off of Bitcoin and moving into the altcoins more, which would really help out all season. So that's what I'm watching on Bitcoin. I think it's a very simple way to analyze it with the 30 and 40-week moving average on the weekly chart and the 50, 150, and 200-day on the daily chart. Okay, that's what I'm watching on Bitcoin. If you're still watching the video, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. Let me know down in the comments if you agree. If you want to see any other tokens, I'd be happy to look into them.